So, strip poker with spirits.
Strip poker with spirits. That was a story in this book that I've been looking at. I think I've recommended her work before. It's Renissa Avila. She has a few different studies on different Slavic spirits and creatures, and her first one in that whole series is on household spirits, obviously relevant to the kitchen episode.
Mm.
Not, and we keep teasing that we're gonna do
Very.
the house spirit episode soon, but soon is a nebulous promise to make. Okay, it's coming, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of research, and we want to give it a lot of space. But there was a story in this book about strip poker with a spirit, in which Key, you'll like this. It's treasure hunters, right? They're armed with a grimoire. It's a series of Turkish and Bulgarian treasure hunters who find a cave, and then as they are using the enchantments in the book, the cave opens, like a side door opens in the rock, disclosing this motionless lady who's very beautiful. And the more the Hodja chants, the more this woman begins to move and like take off her headdress, then her clothes, and he does this too, right? He removes his turban, and then she takes off her jacket, and he takes off his, and so on and so forth. Until they and it says, appeared in the costume of Adam and Eve before the fall, like butt naked. And then one of the young Turks, who is part of sorry.
Strike Uyghur.
No, 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 not that kind of young Turk, but one of the physically younger Turkish gentlemen in the story forgets that you're not supposed to speak other than the grimoire's words. And then, he says out loud, like, "Hey, Hoja, what are you doing?" to the buddy who's now completely naked. And then, of course, because he breaks the spell by speaking, a blast of wind basically flips them out of the cave and puts them right outside Alaya Monastery, but without the clothes. Which just is to say, don't break the enchantment before you're done, the whole thing, before you secure the bag. For a little Frightful Howls tip, always secure the bag. If a spirit is challenging you to strip poker or making you strip or do whatever you need to do to get the treasure first.
Mhm.
Don't fuck with the process.
Exactly.
Otherwise you're gonna get pranked. The spirits are petty.
I mean, I'm with the spirit on this because if you're getting naked as Adam and Eve, and then suddenly someone says, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?"
Yeah, literally.
Like, do you not see these tatas? Do you
Gaze
not
upon
see
them
all
and
of this?
despair.
Yeah, it's like, what do you think I'm doing? Hunting elephants? Out.
It's
Rude.
So rude.
it's the treasure spirit's gambit, right?
Hmm.
It's one of the oldest tricks in the book.
And always be thankful if someone wants to play strip poker with you.
Hey, they're showing you the goods for free, okay? So like, chill
So
out.
be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Sfinga salt and butter key.
Oh, the butter.
Mhm.
Oh Lordy, churning
That's
it.
right. We are indeed churning it today. And of course, as you can tell, we have a guest. Welcome back, Caspar, another friendly face over here at Frightful Howl's
Hi.
headquarters.
Oh, so glad to have you back. It's been a hot second. We had you on episode 35, and talk about Dutch folk magic, and now we are here to chat kitchen witching, all the fun
Mhm.
stuff and magic you can do in a kitchen. Obviously, this could be a book. This is not just a roughly 2 hour long episode, but we're gonna try and get through as many possibilities and tips and tricks as we can to be as actionable and helpful to our listeners in terms of just like doing more creative sorcery that's effective and real and efficacious in some of the most populated areas and most traditionally sacred areas of the household.
Right. Well, let's get to it.
Mhm. And Of course, much like the care and keeping of the kitchen to bring continued prosperity and success, let's ensure our continued prosperity by smoothly transitioning into
Smooth, just
um,
like butter.
exactly. So, all the usual stuff. Remember to check us out at patreon.com/the Fretful Howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and just for our patrons. We have a Discord server where you can share magical recipes all your own. We do encourage kitchen witching. We also have Salt's Fantastic Almanac, a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing, show notes for every episode, and a whole new tier for monthly group spell work from the three of us here at the Howls on your behalf.
This month it's going to be all on dignity, honors, and health. And last month was on prosperity, fortune, money, and road opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, be sure to check out the Patreon to see what those workings look like and what those blessings can be for you. Also, just remember to give us a like, a rating, a review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you might be listening to us. It really helps us fight the demiurge of the algorithm and ensure that we can keep doing our thing. Then, last but not least, check out our services. I offer personalized coaching in magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings, custom talismans, oils, tools, etc. You name it. We'll sit down, we can talk about it, and get you some results. Svinga offers Balkan Favamancy readings. She's the best. Go book a reading with her.
Aw, thank you.
And Salt's Astro books are closed, but keep an eye out for his monthly astrological almanac on the Patreon. Then make sure to hit us up on social media. Svinga is at Dragon Cunning, Salt is at SaltCNC, and I am at Barnell.key. And, of course, can't forget, we have a guest.
Mm-hmm.
Go check out Caspar's work on Instagram, the Duivelbanner van Overijssel, and the website of the same name, Duivelbanner van Overijssel.wordpress.com.
So good. It's in Dutch. Just Google Translate it. It's fantastic. We were just talking about like browsing WordPress statistics and being and Caspar was like, "You're the Canadian." I'm like, "I'm the Canadian," but hopefully soon to be many more Canadians
Yeah.
because it's a great website.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Go check it out. Tons of amazing gems.
Mm-hmm.
That's a treasure trove.
Yeah, legit. Salt, do you remember when I first showed you the website before I even hung out with Caspar in person? And I was showing you some of the work that he's done on Mary and on folk charms, and you were like, oh shit, this is real, real.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's love it. I love your work,
Hmm.
man.
Hmm.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, we have you on because actually, outside of the podcast and everything like that, we are actually friends. That is our rule when it comes to guests. They have to be friends of ours, not just people that we, like and admire, which are many. If they have a personal relationship. And one of the things that we do is we're often hanging out, chatting, catching up over tea, and talking about the wonderful worlds of Lenormand, of playing card divination, of spiritism, saints. Marian magic and kitchen magic. And kitchen,
Yes.
even putting it that way makes it sound so strange to me because to me it's not like a concrete area of sorcery in the sense that like so much of my practice has to do with the house and its organs. But to me, this is the stomach of
Mhm.
and the heart, of so much of the household. And it's, people say kitchen magic to mean like like praying over a tea or something like that, or like sweetening soap with sugar. This is all fine, but like we're talking about like very serious sorcery that can be done in this place, which is where everyone meets. It is a central crossroads of the home. It is a central organ where many spirits live, and we'll talk about some of them across our traditions. And we'll also discuss what are the actual implements of art, as it were, in this area where it comes to ladles and pots and pans and teapots and the stove, the fridge, cutlery, whisks, and brooms that are essentially used by many traditional folk practitioners, including in all, I would say all the folk magics that the four of us have been trained in, as serious, weapons of magic that are not just there to be used in like a culinary context, but are there also to transfer their properties into cursing and blessing and love magic and prosperity magic and everything you can imagine.
Well, I mean, it would be hypocritical of me to deny that I'm not using those particular implements of doom because I have a more than a meter long wood carved goulash stirring
Hmm.
spoon, and it's giant wooden spoons inspire awe,
Yeah.
Hmm.
especially when you're wielding them and fastly or quickly walking towards someone. Solves a whole lot of argument.
Truly, truly.
It's got the benefit as well of like the double effect, right? Because on one hand, you can carry it menacingly, but you can also, there's also looks of anticipation when it's carrying the food out, right? Like,
Yes.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and when I still lived in London, I was getting heavily into talking about naans, getting heavily into Indonesian food.
Hmm.
And I couldn't figure out a recipe, but I wasn't listening to what the spirits were saying. I was just hyper focused on reading the recipe and doing that. And till this day, I still don't know how it happened. As I was faffing about, the ladle, no, sorry, the what should we call it? The wooden thing to stir with, not a spoon, a spatula, sorry,
Hmm.
did a somersault from from the edge of the pan. It somersaulted up and smacked me on both wrists.
Oh.
And that was the moment I was like, I need to put the recipe away and just listen what they have to say and just
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
The meal turned out amazing, but it I was like, okay, putting that away, I'm gonna listen to the Nans.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to start, which is what are some of the spirits that you encounter here in your traditions? I think all of us have probably very overlapping species, as it were, or genuses of
Hmm.
species that we can probably relate to, but they may take very different expressions and forms. So maybe Caspar, you could tell us a little bit about what are the main spirits that it doesn't mean necessarily a tradition, but like that you personally encounter and are often in direct communion with in this area of the home.
For me personally, it's the house spirit that plays a central role in it. So if I am cooking or just making tea, one of the things that you, Svinga, also mentioned in an earlier podcast or episode was always giving the house spirit a little something, like whether it's food from the plate you just made or
Hmm.
something to drink. I tend to do that, which if it's really good food, there's a happy response for a lot. There's an impression of music and laughter and like arm bracelets that are jingling.
Hmm.
And I get the impression that it's a gnome, but I haven't looked too closely into that out of respect, and I don't want to be rude towards a
Hmm.
spirit that has been nothing but benevolent towards me.
Hmm.
So, yeah. And just that, well, with my previous example of Indonesian food and being smacked on the wrists, focusing heavily, being focused, busy with a recipe that is new or from a different culture, that somehow seems to bring in other spirits as well,
Hmm.
or make contact with certain energetic fields that are partial to that. So it's very
Mhm.
dynamic, and what you mentioned earlier that the kitchen is a place where stuff comes together, people come together. I find that that's also true for spirits.
Hmm.
Only it's a lot more fluid and far-reaching. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's uh, it's kind of like when you're walking past a barbecue, right? And you think, oh shit, I want some of that, man. Like you can smell the charcoal smoke from a distance.
Hmm.
And spirits are the same way, right? Like if we're making something fragrant, something that's the smoke's coming out everywhere, it's like sometimes they want in as well, even though you don't know them. And sometimes spirits are bold enough, unlike us, to just roll up and be like, "Hey,
Hmm.
what you got there, man?"
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's also why there's a thing we recommended many times on the podcast in different incarnations, which is to have some zone in your home, preferably in a hallway or someplace that's not like a stable, it's more like a crossroads, where wayward ambient spirits can come by, refresh themselves with a little bit of water or a candle, perhaps, and then they leave. So they're like, okay, you had your bit and you go now. There's times when I might have to give a slight drop of something to the floor just to say, okay, everything else that's, salivating for a taste of whatever is going on here, take this and then go. Like you had your thing, now you don't have to steal, or now you don't have to, you're allowed to sate yourself with this. And I know you want more, but you don't get to have more. So at least this will tell you not to keep stealing. And this is usually the role of that central house spirit that often lives in the hearth or in the fireplace or in the kitchen. For those of us who don't have fireplaces, it's definitely the kitchen, I would say, is where the spirit would live. But either way, in many traditional housings, these things are one and the same. Like the central hearth is where the kitchen is. Like that's where you heat everything that you make. And so this is where that spirit would live, and it distributes offerings into everyone else. It's like kind of that great, uh, you know, replica in some ways of what the lady of the house, usually this is a gendered figure, but the woman of the house is the one who owns the house and distributes its offerings to the humans that live within it, right?
No, exactly.
Hmm.
And abides by the rules of hospitality.
Exactly, and spirit hospitality is a whole thing. Like it's one of the reasons why in book and folk magic we have all these different techniques for like how do you prepare your table? How do you set up a table for the guests that are saints, that are the dead, that are, potentially vile, which are fairies, which obviously don't ever do unless, you're trained in this. And if you have questions about fairies, we will always send you straight to Rose, our good friend Rose Aurora, who is our, in-house, as it were, specialist in all things fairy. But nevertheless, even for other kinds of the good folk, hospitality measures are so key, and it's people who are really trained in these things because they are also aware of other kinds of hospitalities as they overlap with each other that applies to spirits and makes sure that the dead are also taken care of. It's in Serbia we know that on New Year's Eve on Banja Veche, it's a good time to speak well of the dead, to not say anything negative about them, not mention who frustrated you or who still owes you money. But if there's someone who recently died, this is where you'd spill some wine or put a little bit of food directly onto the earth, onto the ground under the table, and you might be able to scry their reaction of how happy they are, if they're being fed well, if they're participating in this feast, by literally scrying the gravy on the table. So, like, it's one thing to scry impressions on candles by saint altars, in front of the icons, but scrying the gravy is or scrying the coffee that you overturn in an upside down after you've had your Turkish coffee, is which if any of you have ever gone to an Ethiopian restaurant with me, you know that this is immediately something that I will do without necessarily even asking if you want it. I would just be like, coffee, and we'll just read it afterwards. But it's just an impulse, right? This is exactly where you can see how happy and how satiated the dead are.
So what
Mhm.
you're telling me is that if we're having coffee, I'm getting a free fortune telling afterwards?
Yes, I believe we've demonstrated this. Well, we went to high tea once, Caspar, and we started reading for each other pretty quickly. I took out the beans right there and then.
The
Although I think
beans,
the
yeah.
beans, yeah, the other kinds of beans. Yeah, well, speaking of storage, right, where we keep these things, something that's really I mentioned a spirit many times. They're called different things in different cultures, and in the Balkans, smok is one of
Yeah.
them. But in Bulgarian folklore, for example, but to us in Serbia, it's a Zmija čuvarkuća. So this is a serpent or snake house guardian, the house guardian snake. And this is an ancestral inheritance for sure, of a time when we considered our ancestors to come as serpents, and without seeing serpents as a more negative symbol. But Nezmia Chuvrikucha is actually is this house spirit that in some ways predates this notion of like a domovoi, which we don't really use that word. I mean, there's many different kinds of ways that we refer to this house spirit. It looks more like a little gnome, more like a grandfather image. Anything I say, please take with a grain of salt because I'm referring only to a very particular region where I grew up. Any other place in the country will have a different name for this, so don't take this as gospel. This is just one oral version of this. Like I grew up calling the spirit a domachin, which is also a regular word that just refers to like a master of a house. But yes, the Zmija Czurkucha is this usually white serpent that lives somewhere in the Hearthstone. And it's said that, planting a snake's head along with seeds will ensure a good harvest. And you might want to carry a serpent's eggs with you to prevent bullets from grazing you and so on. Or a snakeskin wrapped in cloth can be put around waists to help a woman conceive. So serpents have this fertility connotation, right? And they're such important spirits in witchcraft and in folk magic alike. But this Mia Churakucha specifically is a house guardian that distributes offerings and also can act a little bit like an East German Drache, which steals the fertility of other people in your neighborhood for you. So this can it said they love sucking milk, so they might drink the milk from another person's cow and then put it in your cow. And so this house spirit is usually a non-poisonous snake. Can appear as a hedgehog, but often as a serpent. They may shine like gold in Czechia. They might be seen as colorful, or red with white ears, in Serbia. They might be gray in southern Russia. They might also be white, like I mentioned, in Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, and Slovakia. Or they might have a cross on the forehead or wear a golden crown in Slovakia. Or in Bulgaria, sometimes you hear that they might be blind. And sometimes there's one major one of these spirits that protects an entire village. That's a giant serpent with wings that flies over houses like a fall of fire. And this is actually the village dragon, or Dismay. But the Zmija Czurkucha is ultimately a protector of livestock and also one that punishes the livestock of others. And anyone who I've ever really explored this arcana with knows very well that these serpents notoriously love milk and omelets, specifically omelets. Like so many of these folk tales refer to omelets as like the main offerings. So yes, they like eggs. Obviously, we know this about actual physical serpents. But a ritual meal of a glass of wine, a piece of bread, a cup of boiled wheat, and an omelet is the ideal offering to this spirit. And again, offering them cow's milk or sheep's milk is always a good idea because this also sates them, so they're not always getting things from other people. But obviously, trapping someone else's house serpent is a good way to steal their fertility. And there's many different dates when they are especially empowered. They can also be warded away by garlic. And you could take them on the first Saturday of Lent, on Theater Saturday, which I actually brought up in my last blog post where I talked about my Saint Harlambos charms. If you have this garlic be blessed on that day, it will certainly ward away these serpents because Saint Theodore is the one that drives the serpents back into the earth, and is able to punish them by cutting off their limbs when they originally looked like lizards to make them limbless. But anyway, they are like a quintessential quote unquote kitchen spirit in the sense that they live in the kitchen, right? And they have a very tremendously important relationship with Saint Petka, who is, probably the most beloved female saint in the Orthodox world, in the Balkans, who is a patron of women's activities like spinning and weaving. But she also is the Lady of Friday, the lady who represents the passage into the underworld and the guardian of the home altar. And during her October feast day, it's a time when winter is said to be approaching rapidly, and so it's no sowing of the fields take place. And instead, if you do this work, you may incur her wrath, and she will appear as a serpent. And in fact, so in her honor, we may say on Fridays or on the Saints' Day, women don't perform spinning and weaving, and instead we honor her as a serpent goddess, as somebody who can punish us and take our fertility, because instead of resting our hands and resting our bodies and making sure that we're not overworking ourselves, we are going counter to the fertility of the fields.
That makes sense. But the I love how it's all tied up with hospitality,
Mm-hmm.
f feeding of fertility,
Mm-hmm.
hospitality, fertility, good manners in a way,
Mm-hmm.
or just stepping outside of the social contract entirely by stealing someone else's fertility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I love how flexible it is, and with to get back to blessed butter key, the like if your butter churner is hexed, it also affects like butter is of course a delicacy, still is, like real good butter. Then if you can't produce that, you can't produce fat along with the other things that you're eating. It also has an influence on the stuff you eat, quite literally. Because if you want to, a good image of that is if you are cooking, how would you start with your meat if you have to bake it? You will cut onions, but before you put anything in the pan, like vegetables or meat wise, what goes in the pan? Butter.
Mm-hmm.
To quote Julia Child, you can never have too much butter.
So true.
So true. Yeah. And
Mm.
if butter, fertility in the form of butter isn't there, or it's being whisked away by some greedy practitioner who sent their imps out, or dragons out, or you name it, or hedgehog, then yeah, that will become a problem. You don't touch my butter.
Especially considering the
Unless, of course,
process it takes you to make butter in the
yeah.
first place, right? It's a lot of labor.
Yeah, Key and I were talking about that, like what kinds of butter to make. Which, by the way, I have a lovely tarragon chicken recipe stashed away somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The
Oh yeah.
I love how welcoming spirits can be, like what I mentioned with my house spirit as well. But it's tied to rules of good manners and hospitality. And if you follow that, everything is fine. But if you, at least I don't know how it is for you three, but if I work in a kitchen like baking brownies, which is a simple recipe, especially if you're doing boxed brownies from a box and you're zhuzhing them up with some extra fancy ingredients. Even then, if the kitchen is not happy, generally I find that the baking becomes this long, drawn out process where everything goes wrong or essential steps goes wrong. Like you can't soften the butter no matter how long it's been out of the fridge, or the mixer just won't do, or the oven turns itself off, or goes to a higher temperature that the whole thing burns, basically. So it's the difference between working in a kitchen that is happy and fed and fertile. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm sure of it. And a kitchen that is not appreciated for the spiritual place that it is. It does make a huge difference. The kitchen of my partner's place, he's not spiritual. Let's keep it at that. And baking there sometimes feels like a struggle because the house spirit isn't happy.
Mm.
And then trying to do something, I'm sticking to the brownies here. Then baking brownies in preparation for a party to take them to a party. The house spirit was very clear, like, but what about my brownies? What about my party? What about my offerings?
Mm-hmm.
And as far as kitchen spirits, they're to me at least, it's very clear that they actively want to be involved in the residents of that particular house and kitchen's life because somehow there's a symbiotic relationship.
Hmm.
At least I'm guessing that's how it's evolved. And that yeah, I find that a fascinating area, especially if you're, we've all been in the mood of cooking or barbecuing. It just invites in. Cooking draws people and spirits in. And it just happens automatic. Like we've all walked past the kitchen where something delicious was made, be it hot chocolate or brownies or fresh bread. What is there a better scent from an oven than fresh bread being baked or the smell of the scent of onions in butter
Hmm.
Hmm.
while they're soft? You name a better scent than that. I'll wait.
Yeah.
It's a part how these spirits are also drawn, right? And why they distribute things. Like the serpent that I was mentioning, can equally harm as well as to bless, right? Depending on how sated they are.
Yeah.
They also rule in many ways. They're in direct correspondence with the threshold. And we talked about this in a very recent episode we did on basically cleansing the house. We were just thinking like, okay, well, if we're talking about cleansing and keeping the house clean, we also have to talk about the spirits that are involved in the house. And so we
Hmm.
mentioned thresholds, and Salt and Key both touched on the burning of, for example, a dried cat underneath the threshold of the door. And for us, we might do a bat, for example, and a gold coin to bring good luck. We might do a toad in order to bring fertility and control the rain. We might do a cross on the door. We might do bread and salt at the door to represent flesh and blood sacrifices, right? We might do cleansing the threshold by putting coins in a bowl and by it and so on and so forth. But this is also a place where the house spirit is referred to leaves, right? So they come back and collect all the blessings that they've harvested into the kitchen. And so really it's a place of good sense. It has this, as you were mentioning, Caspar, like this natural aroma, this natural incense of good food, right? And it's where people are fed and replenished. And so this is all of the kind of hospitality things we've been talking about with keeping your
Yeah.
house spirits sated is also just making sure they participate in this. That you're not just like, oh, I'm having good luck with money recently and things are nice, and my partner and I are getting along. We're not fighting. Like everything's good and beautiful. It's important that there's like a little like thank you given to the house spirit because they are also the lord of the fertility of the family. And
Hmm.
so much like Saint Petka is, this patron of women and women's activities, she's also the patron of women's happiness. She can punish them, but she can also reward them. And so it's this reminder that like having that kind of spiritual engagement in your home is a huge way in which these spirits will be able to reciprocate. We told a story in that episode actually about a friend of ours who lives with a roommate, and they have a house spirit, and the friend who is petitioning the house spirit and giving it offerings, her room in that basement apartment is always okay. And then the friend that isn't, their other roommate is constantly having flooding issues or weird things happen or like damages and so on and so forth until they both started contributing equally to the house spirit. And it
Hmm.
was just one of those situations where they know that you know they exist if you are a spiritual person, which just makes them more aware of who doesn't interact with them as if they exist. And so that's part of hospitality is to the invisible beings that uphold our luck.
It's I think one of the things I find really interesting as well, obviously from like a English context, is when we talk about like household spirits, and I think probably the first thing that comes to most people's mind is like, up north brownies, in the southwest like pixies obviously can take on a household spirit role as well. Hobgoblins in the Midlands, for example. I think there's a little bit of a distinction in the way that they behave, the fairies. And so they come with all the, associated taboos that come with fairies, right? Like you can very easily offend them. And they're very much participants in the lives of the people that live there, right? But that participation is on their terms. Their engagement with people is on their terms. And I find that quite an interesting dynamic because I don't think contrast is the right word, but like the rules are, how do I put it? They, there's lines, right? So when it comes to like the household, for example, like they might support you with chores or support you with your cooking, or they might punish you in these departments as well. Like, butter was used as an example. I think the, stereotypical image of fairies cursing someone's butter. is very, very apt there. But like, it's interesting to me the way in which these kinds of spirits can, those household spirits, but each different kind of spirit, each species relative to their culture, location, and so on, has such different understandings of that hospitality that Caspar has brought up and raised here. Like the way you treat them is going to be very distinct from the kitchen god, for example. And I think that's, it kind of brings to mind the idea of locality, right? Like regionality, culture, both spiritual and human social, I guess you could say. It's just something that kind of sticks in my mind, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Even just thinking about for those who maybe are not aware, the kitchen god that you're referring to is a Taoist spirit.
Yeah, Chinese folk religion.
Yeah, and something that was really interesting about experiencing doing work with that spirit with you when you live with me was being like, oh, it's such an enduring presence. You know, that spirit has such a ability to now interact and interface and be plugged into all the other spirits of my home, whether I'm aware of them or not, and monitor them. Be aware of them. Like that's normally a role I give to my Zmieoczu Kucha. But once you started working with the kitchen god in my house, I was like, whoa, this is a completely different vibe. And now the hospitality matrix is extended. So it's just something for people to be aware of when they work multiple traditions. Because I also have, Mavambos, Katisos, Eshus, and Pombagiras of the kitchen as well. They will find a way to navigate their hierarchies, but some of them can be fed collectively, but some of them will distribute things amongst themselves based on their own understandings of their hierarchy that may not be yours. And so it's really interesting to just be aware that if you're working multiple traditions and there's multiple saints or spirits you honor in the kitchen, take some time to sit with them and ask them how do things socially work between them.
Absolutely, yeah. Because, it's not a vacuum, right? Like, and I think that's one of the challenges for people like ourselves who are engaging in multiple traditions is the way that they interface and connect with one another and they interact with each other. Like, for example, we're talking about the kitchen god. There's also, the bathroom goddess, for example. Like, um, how do you address, you know, let's say someone's practicing jinn magic in the same household, right? And obviously, jinn are well known for living around that area. So how do you reconcile? How do you address that? And how do they engage with each other and interact with each other? I think that's always really important to explore and investigate in these kind of situations as part of a devotional and maybe less devotional, but like, familial or friendship, however, depending on the relationship with the spirit in question, and its nature. But I think these are important questions to ask, yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And actually, speaking of England, Salt, since you brought it up, I did want to mention that I was reading through Claude Lecoteau's book, The Tradition of the Household Spirits, for clues into some other kind of kitchen magic, workings. And one thing that he mentions in one section is that, there's this habit that's been discovered in Cambridgeshire in England of fairy loaves and fossilized sea urchins being kept at the kitchen windowsill to actually ensure, in a way of sympathetic magic, that there will never be a shortage of bread. And
Yeah.
I think that really relates to what you're referring to with the brownies and the other kinds of, good folk that might live in the space is there's that capacity for tremendous wealth and fertility blessings that can be secured, but also reminding them to secure them by being like, hey, like in exchange for all the porridge and the butter and the milk and the cream that I'm giving you, and the fresh bread and the fact that even when we're poor, we're giving you a little, at least a morsel of everything that we're eating, secure us that there will never be this shortage because that will also negatively impact you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's part of the relationship, right? Like when we think of fairies in particular as well, I think especially of like leaving a pad of water out for them to bathe in, right? And this is something you wouldn't kind of necessarily think of initially. But they don't want to necessarily share a bathing space with human beings, right? And so you give them their own water, their own space to use, to utilize. And in that kind of respect, they're also, they're participating in the household, right? Like you're making space for them, you're making accommodations for them in the same way that they're doing it for you, right? It's like any other, it's not quite like any other, but it's quite like, just having a roommate, like you have to accommodate each other, and work around one another in a
Hmm.
positive and, fruitful capacity.
Hmm. I always encounter the same situation, which is the more I nourish my Zmia Churkucha, or the equivalent, and also, even after you move out, I've been really tending. Honestly, I was telling Salt earlier today, I've been doing a good job. I've been tending to the kitchen god because he's definitely active. Even though it's not my practice, it is now, right? In some ways, because we're roommates in this way, as you were mentioning. Like, I've been really finding that the more I tend to them, the more everything, like every magic I do in my house, like from any floor or from any place, it exits out the threshold more easily. And not just because of the location of the kitchen in my house, but I mean like it passes and refreshes itself through the station that that house spirit has. So common offerings, we've talked about this a lot, right? Porridge and milk and honey and cream and all these other kinds of things, right, are great. But it's also the actual acknowledgement of, like, as you were saying, we are roommates, we share the space, we have different needs. Sometimes we don't want them to overlap. We want different water, for example, as you were saying. But the more I nourish them, the more the overall fertility of everything increases. So as we kind of eventually shift gears a little bit to talk about kitchen implements and recipes and different kinds of sorcery you can do in the space, I think it's just worth really emphasizing the importance of these spirits and of getting to know them if you don't know them. And even if you live with roommates, as we were mentioning in our previous episode on cleansing the house, if that's the case, you can just gain the upper hand, quite literally, by being the one that tends to these beings. And it's so easy to have a very tiny shrine, or if you don't want to have it in the common area because you're worried of how it would look, just leaving a bowl out in some way and as just like a mysterious little place that things get fed, and eventually composting it, and saying like, hey, this is an honor of the good spirits that are here. It's a positive thing, and usually people will be okay with that. And if not, there's obviously ways you can tap it, like take the bowl and tap it like to the kitchen, or to the stove, and be like, hey, I'm giving this to you, but I'm going to move this now to my bedroom or to where I'm sleeping because of the privacy concerns that I have. You can have it there, but I'm offering it to you here. So that's one thing that often I recommend to people who are in like living situations where they don't want to be exposed for doing any kind of quote magic, whether they're with family or roommates that would be very disapproving, and you don't want to get evil-eyed, right? Unintentionally, is take the bowl that you've prepared as an offering and tap it to the stone of like the hearthstone, as it were. That could just literally be your stovetop, like tapping it there and say, this is for you. Now follow me here, and I'll light the candle in my room, and that's where you consume it.
That's a good idea. And also, if you're, let's say, living in a student situation, if you're cleaning the kitchen, just whisper a quick prayer, or as an offering, like I'm cleaning this in honor of you.
Yeah. Also, isn't that such a flex though? Key, I'm sure you understand because you've lived with fuck ton of roommates before, but it's such a flex to be like, I'm doing the chores, I'm putting out the trash,
Mhm.
I'm doing the one that's, wiping down the stove, and just a little wink wink nudge nudge to who's really pulling their weight here.
Literally, yeah. I'm like, if there's only a finite amount of wealth going to be coming to this house, then we know who gets their fair share.
You just it just cut cue like to like a video of you like rolling around in the dough and being like, that's right.
Exactly, yeah. Like, and just going back to like just kind of these manipulations of the ambient environment, right? Like a lot of what the kitchen magic is to me is just like you would in the same way of, you know, open the oven just at the right time so all your roommates come in and are like, what's cooking?
Mhm.
Then you're kind of doing the same thing for spirits, right? And kind of to that point of cleaning for these things as an offering, cleaning physically also pretty damn good way of cleansing a space of whatever energy too,
Mhm.
um and we'll definitely be getting to that, but yeah, it's kind of those same correspondences for any of these things and working with those spirits that we recognize in the environment by saying, just use the same example. Bread is, the increase, the staple, the thing that nourishes us. So we'll use it for those same things, increase, nourishing. There are a couple accounts in the Hyatt material, which I got to invoke because I'm a nerd. Um, of, a talisman that ensures there's always work in the home is taking a piece of bread and hanging it next to the door. Because
Mm.
not only is that a symbol of, money always coming through the door, but it's look at all the labor of my hands that have gone into this thing, you know. Um, so to let them keep going.
Totally.
I think that's one of the when it comes to as well, like bringing offerings into the mix, when we talk about what kind of offerings we give them, it's the majority of the time it's staples, right? Like bread, butter, rice if you're in East Asia. And in that kind of way, right, that's another way that the spirits are participating in our daily lives. But it's also, I think, allows us a lot of room, right? Like Key, you mentioned that, bread is sustaining, right? Like it's sustenance, it's nourishing. And in the same respect, like when the spirits are working hard, or like when your roommate's working hard, what do? You probably make them a coffee, right? Or, yo, you want a coffee? I'm gonna grab one now. Um, and that's another situation, right? It was where you're giving them these offerings specifically to help them in their management of the household, in their tasks, in their work. Or obviously when you want to incline them towards attracting particular qualities or virtues in your life as well, specifically if you've got an ongoing working and you need them to, act quickly, then coffee's probably the right bet, right? Or if you're doing defensive works, for example, like you need to protect the household, you need to preserve it, then dried and preserved fruits are also a good option because, and you can leave them on the altar for a few days, even specifically because of those qualities of longevity and long lastedness.
Absolutely. And can I just say, the trick of giving your spirits like fireball whiskey to get them to be like beyond hyper and ready to go fight is so true. Know how to cool them down by giving them starchy porridge afterwards too.
Fireball whiskey.
It's true. It's true. Also, just like coffee with like a shot of whiskey in it or something like that, like
Hmm.
but like it does get them going. I'll give you that.
Hmm. The forest spirit potion
Oh
of
God.
coffee and beer.
Actually, it actually is. And that's actually before we move on, Key, you haven't named your house spirit yet, or like the kind of kitchen spirit that you interact with most. What's the vibe? Is it a window being? Is it an ancestor? Is it just an ambient guy? Is it a house serpent? What's your vibe?
Hmm. I love me the serpent.
I know.
Um,
Omelets. Omelets.
egg.
Egg.
Um, and others are intentionally installed as kind of curators of the resources. So thinking about Apollonia's serving woman from the PGM that we
Yes.
wrote about.
Mm.
Oh my
um
God, yes, yes, that donkey tooth does indeed live by my Zmieću Vrkuća.
mhm, that it does. And for me it's taken on a bit of a life of its own, as a there's this little clay spirit house that I picked up at like an oddities market, and I put it in there, gilded it with gold leaf in thanks for a major lift during the move. And
Hmm.
yeah, and just have kept at that practice. And that's one of the knowable points of managers of the house. There's also a specific ancestor who likes to hang out in the kitchen, likes to hang out with things. So all in that matrix of just making sure things go smoothly and well, and that you know the dishes
Yeah.
are done and the oven is cleaned, right?
No kidding.
Dishes do be piling up very quickly, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's
true.
true.
So why those house spirits are always like, oh, they always like get rid of the dust very well, or they get like the chores done. And it's true. Like when they're fed, there's less dust everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you guys also find that house spirits, in the broad sense, clustered together? Like, um, w- with mine, there's a little corner of the kitchen that they're in. The house, a little statue for the house spirit. there is oh, oh God, I keep forgetting this saint's name, and it's just embarrassing because San Lorenzo, it's from that movie Under the Tuscan Sun. Do you guys know it?
I have not seen it.
Well, I won't spoil it too much for you, but it's a American woman who buys a house in Tuscany,
Hmm.
and eventually she is cooking,
Hmm.
and there's a shot of her cooking in her villa in Tuscany, where there is a statue of Saint Lorenzo,
Hmm.
patron saint of cooks. And the
Mm.
story is that he was being roasted above a fire, and he called out, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side."
Ah, uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay,
And
I
ever
I know
since I
that
saw
very
that
well,
movie,
yeah.
and ever since I saw that movie, I was like, I need to have a statue of him in my kitchen.
Hmm.
And he has saved me many pasta when things could have gone horribly wrong. So there's this little group of small figurines together, and betraying my Catholic roots here, the rather large statue of Mary
Hmm.
overseeing everything. But it's just nice to see how they form like little packs of spirits together.
I love that. And I so understand what you're saying because my house spirit shrine originally was just for Zimia Chivarkucha, gradually accrued as well a human dead, somebody who lived on this land and was so
Oh,
ambiently drawn to all my offerings that they were just circling and circling and became something like a domachin when I moved into this home because they were like, well, I'm here too. And then furthermore, there is something there for a saint that I can't name out loud because of a secrecy pact with her, but she's there now because she took up a role in this. And then Ogina Maria, Saint Marina of Antioch, or Margaret the Virgin in the West, she's there with a very prominent icon overlooking the whole kitchen. And then there is two other male saints who are on the shrine directly because of functions they perform in my folk magic. And then on top of all of that, um, a goodly neighbor who moved in is there as well, being honored in a certain way. And then on top of that, um, like given all of that kind of exposition, there was also, of course, the kitchen goddess Salt installed it, and very close by. And then there's all the threshold guardians, and as well as the Esches and Pombagiras that just kind of like watch over that space. And then I have San Benito, Saint Benedict the Moor, at a very high spot
mhm.
on the kitchen, overlooking everything, with his little cup of coffee. And then I have Saint Haralambos nearby, and so all of that is to say, there's a whole cluster of spirits, right? Plus Mary, of course, because you have to have
Yeah,
her a version of her in every room, apparently.
exactly.
If you're me and Caspar, and it's just this, but they get along so well because they're all being placated in very similar ways, and they divide protections amongst each other.
Yeah, and just imagine the absolute shitstorm when one of them would decide to, you know what? I'm gonna fight everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a house in disarray. That I wouldn't recover from that. If I wake up one
Mm.
morning and all my house spirits are going at each other. That's thinking about that. I actually have been in a situation where I woken up one morning and that the vibe was off, but I couldn't pinpoint what happened or who happened. And it turned out that I left, well, after some searching, it turned out that I left food on the stove, which apparently was a no-go. But the food had also spoiled. And that is one of the things with also where I now live. If there is mold anywhere, there are certain spirits that are like, no, 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 you need to fix this now. Because mold, of course, you don't want mold in your kitchen. It's such a different energy, and it seems to be something they really do not want there, especially in a place of where fertility and keeping that fertility right matters so much, even in preserving food. It's And that's something I've taken up doing as well. I've tasked one of the house spirits with keeping the food that is like open, like bread that I'm using, or jam, or butter, or even the fruit bowl. Like one of the assignments is keep stuff fresh, keep it healthy, keep it full of fertility. And that's really changed, even with the warmer weather coming up. It's really changed a lot in my kitchen, and I'm happy that I thought of doing it.
That's a really, really good uh take too. And I love the idea as well as like preserving longevity and what that would mean to kind of like, protect the whole space. I love in the house cleansing episode we talked in general about having like coffee filters and coffee grounds left out at different windowsills, but like what is that for the kitchen? Why are so many things burned with threshold? This book that I refer to a lot actually in this podcast at this point, I think it's the third time I'm bringing it up. Brian Huggard's Magical House Protection, The Archaeology of Counter Witchcraft, has a few notable references as well. There's a witch in Cornwall, poking salt for commentary here, called Betsy, who collected toads, and it was said that she kept a slate over a hole in her kitchen floor where she kept the toads, so they were literally always available to her when she needed one for like magic, which I thought one, slay. Um, her literal like toad hole, and two, sometimes you just gotta have shit on hand when you want to like do your curses or whatever like that. But there's also another story that's told of discoveries of children's boots behind ovens in the kitchen as a way to secure protection and fertility, right? So like it's they were kind of described as we talked a little bit about, children's shoes and boots being used as protection items. But in this case, it's again going back to what we were just talking about, which is, you have all these blessings, but how do you secure them?
It's kind of the big thing, right? Is just how taking these anchors for whatever the symbol of that blessing may be to us, and stashing it in that the heart of the home, and to keep the blood pumping into that blessing, as it were. Like, mentioning the thing that we got by always having work is now the talisman that makes sure we always have work. Or like,
Mm-hmm.
same with the shoes or any other article or gift that's left out, both as charm and for the spirits of the home to use. Just reminds me a lot of like Vilmartal's, like the no manuscript as well,
Mm.
and talking about all of like the different apparatuses, tables, small tools that you can leave out to you know have the spirits who might not have anything better to do, to pick up a broom and help you out.
Mm-hmm.
The gnome stool. Oh, God. I forgot about that. I actually looked into contacting a local carpenter to make one for me. I never got around to it, but I was like, I need one of those so my gnome can rest.
Yeah, let him put his feet up.
Yeah. Like, if Betsy, what was her name again from Cornwall?
Yes, this is good old Betsy.
If Betsy can have Toad in the hole in her house, I, I want a gnome too.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But alas.
But alas.
But talking about house spirits, actually, researching for this episode, I actually learned something new about Dutch folklore
Hmm.
because you have there are so-called working spirits. So if you don't put your spinning wheel or any tool away after you're done with it in the correct way. Like I'm gonna stick to a spinning wheel for now. So if you don't put release the tension and put the mother of all back into a resting position, and you take off the tension band for the big wheel, there is a spirit that will come during the night, and while you're in bed, you will hear the sounds of a working spinning wheel. Though if you get up in the morning, nothing will have been spun. Though I did encounter another name for those work spirits called night workers, and there was a little bit that really caught my attention because one part in the description is they force you to do the work that you didn't do during the day, so that you're very tired the next morning. But they could also be servants of the devil who, at a sorcerer's request, torment you or do the work in one stroke for you. So if you're a carpenter, they just hammer once and everything that you wanted to put together has been magically put together. Sounds very convenient. I need
Hmm.
that spell. But
Hmm.
it's it's again that duality, like the blessing, the fertility, but also if you're not gonna put in the work, we're gonna make you do the work and it's gonna cost you rest and energy in this case. But it can also be apparently be sent by other magicians to either steal your butter or anything else they should desire. And I didn't know that about, I knew about working spirits, but I didn't know that there was what you also mentioned earlier, Swinga, and Salt also did, that there is a duality in that relationship. And again, with the rules, the social contract with spirits that we apparently have.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I just went
absolutely.
off on a little tangent. I'm sorry for that.
No, I love it. This actually segues perfectly into our tools, right? Ladles, pots, pans, teapots, right? Let's stoves and the fridge and the whisk and the broom. I want to hear all about it. Because if maybe I can get us started a little bit because one of the things that contrary to just like fertility magic we might think of that these are used on is in combat, right? Specifically spirit combat, fighting spirits. So the Stuhachi, the Vetrovniak, the Oblachar, the Gradobranite, these names for these call born, like born in that white call, weather sorcerers and shamans of the Balkans. The terms that I just use are all Serbian, but there's many other kinds, including the Krsnik, including the Dragoar, and so on, that are specifically use household kitchen items as their weapons. So it's known that they will take a fatwood staff that's burned on both ends as their main lance, like as their main implement of fighting. They might also use spindles, for example, a piece of beam, like especially taken from around the kitchen area, or with large trees, especially beech, fir, elm, or oak, which it's said that they can uproot with one hand together with the roots, or they'll beat like large stones and so on when they fly out their bodies and use this. But ultimately, they're like classic weapons are going to be milk dishes. So it's usually a milk dish that is used to take in cow's milk or sheep's milk and take it into the house and boil. It might be a broom that is used to sweep the kitchen specifically. It might be ladles as well that are especially wooden ladles. These kitchen items are normally made of wood, especially birch. A vessel in which milk is stored or cooked, which is also what we might mean by milk dish. And certainly large pots where things are boiled, so such as soups, for example, and stews. And the reason, you might think the image of people fighting with these as weapons is a little bit silly, but I want you to think a little bit about like what these things represent, right? This is quite literally where the ultimate kind of the Eucharist, if you will, if I'm being a little poetic or extreme, of fertility of the family are kept, right? And so this is also all related to weather magic. So, for example, we all know the classic story of taking a wet rag and slapping a rock with it to make it rain, right? But like using a wooden spoon to as things boil, to churn storms and you're speaking to the veterani voivode, to like the wind dukes as we call them, to call the storms from the north or from the east or from the south or the west. depending on the direction in which you are stirring the hot water over your hearth or over your stove, right? Ladles, which scoop up and deposit portions, deposit fertility into the bowls of different people, into the bowl of your house spirit. This is the same ladle that you are giving your house spirit porridge with, that you're also giving to your children, to your husband, to your friends, and so on, right? Using that as a way to scoop up the kind of wetness of the clouds and stir them and put them in other places to say, not the clouds here. I don't want them to rain here. I want them to rain elsewhere, or I want the thunder to fall elsewhere, right? Take the milk pail and say that, just as, let's say, these deities or these saints patron cows and livestock, so too am I taking this and saying, I'm securing this. This is my treasure. My house serpent is protecting this. Nothing else can take this. And in fact, I'm bringing it to battle with me so I can secure someone else's fertility. And then, of course, it goes without saying, of course, the kitchen knife, especially if you have a black handled one that you tie with basil or rosemary to it with a piece of red string, is used for conjuring. This is sometimes called the kustra in different dialects. But ultimately, you are literally using everyday implements that are so tremendously consecrated to their use that now they're able to really like channel their forces in literal spirit combat, right? So yes, you can use pointed twigs and leaves. Actually, there's even some that use straws. And so the idea being you can suck moisture out from one end and then spit it out into another, right? Again, this is manipulating the weather in disguise in this way. And a frying pan, not just an excellent weapon to hit people with. I think we've all seen cartoons where someone like wields a frying pan, like some Tom and Jerry shit, where like they go bonk. But really, this is also to heat things, right? To heat spirits. You capture someone else's familiar or someone else's house serpent that's rooting around your stuff and trying to take your magical power from you and say, oh, I know she's a magician, she's a sorceress, or God forbid she's a witch. I'm gonna take her fertility or of her magic. I want her magic for my own. I want to increase my power by stealing hers. And if you catch her spirits doing it to you, I know many grannies who've told me you find their serpent, you see what they've sent, you see it kind of lurking towards your hearth, trying to steal your magic. You take it, you bite its head off, and you put the rest of it directly into a frying pan and you fry it. And as very, very goetic in some ways, very like punishing a demon, but really you are frying them to get the truth out. You're distilling the fat, and then you make something out of the fat, kind of like catching, stopping up a witch. See our witch bottle episode number 31. Using the urine or frying. And we also have good examples in that episode of like boiling a witch's urine and so on and so forth, right? And how this can damage and hurt the original person who cast the spell on you, or boiling your own, in which there's a sympathetic link to the person who cursed you. And so when this battle ends, especially between different stuhachi, between these particular soldiers, these weather magicians, the ones who lose presumably die. And those who die, then they leave behind their tools. It's the loot they drop, as it were, at the end of the raid of the boss battle. And so the winners come in and take it. And so you've quite literally taken the physical implements of their household fertility and brought it back into your own home. That is the ultimate victory. So again, this is folklore, especially from Western Serbia, where I'm quoting it specifically around the Zlatibor region, for those who know where that is. But ultimately, this is a mythology that I've seen in Albania and Bosnia and Croatia, Slovenia, Bulgaria, and so on in many different places. And just worth noting that like it's not just about like, oh yes, sweetening magic and love, and obviously we all know to strain tea and coffee through our underwear to make someone love us, or to include our menstrual blood or whatever else we need to do, your spit, whatever, in cooking. When beans are being read, if it's a love reading and it's favorable, you might incorporate those beans into a bean dish and you feed it to your lover to be like, hey, the divination said we're gonna end up together, so eat this and make that happen. There's all kinds of things that can be done, and those are all really important parts of magic. I just also wanted to bring up that these items are used to fight and to manipulate weather, and to use weather as a way to fight other people.
Absolutely. I love this example. I think it as well, like some of it in our modern day, like it seems extreme, but like if you think about it in the pre-modern period, for example, like the late Middle Ages, what's going to happen when someone comes along, uses enchantments, and your chickens wander off following them home, right? And then the next day it's your cows are not giving milk anymore. It's like, oh, the entire family is now going to starve. Um, and but the most striking thing out of everything you've said is the realization that the biggest arms dealer is the milkman. The milkman is out here
Yeah,
delivering
yes.
bottles of milk. He's
Not the
like,
milkman.
yeah, he's out
Oh
there delivering
no.
weapons, man. Like, look at this guy. He's leaving these glass bottles here for the spirits to pick up.
Oh my
Loaded
God.
milk sounds wrong.
Loaded milk.
Nasty.
Oh God, what have I done?
We've loaded some
The
milk.
oh, don't.
Do not come.
We might we might crash Svinga's computer again or computer screen
No,
again.
it
Don't.
happened too many times.
Oh
No, but
God.
I mean, Salt is right. Yeah, the milkman is dangerous. If someone had, I
Mhm.
mean, of course, also there comes the where the province where I now live, which is not Overijssel anymore, but Groningen. There used to be a taboo on accepting food while visiting people. So apparently,
Oh.
children were standardly told if we're at not direct family, but other people's houses, don't accept a cup of drink or food that they present. Just don't. And that was all had all to do with the food being enchanted, possibly being enchanted. And if the milkman enchants has loaded your milk with bad luck, or someone magically, the Pied Piper whisks away your chickens or cows or the milk from the cows, yeah, I mean that's a huge problem. That's like, what do you do against that danger besides talking to your own spirits about it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Not to mention, I really want to emphasize that this is not so outdated. Like in the village where my family's from, these are still modern concerns. These are not things that are like, oh,
Oh
only,
yeah.
an old-timey, places where this was this relevant. Like this is still a concern because people are living in an agrarian, kind of fertility cycle of the land. And so it is a huge deal if like, we talk about the master of wolves, like it's a big deal if the wolves take away your chickens and your sheep. Like you are now financially fucked.
Yeah.
And so it is so important to do these propitiation practices precisely for those reasons.
Mhm.
Well, kitchen magic, or as with all of our practices, it touches something very, it touches the core of something very primal. It's about survival. And if
Hmm.
survival means that you have to steal someone else's fertility or magical power or whatever you want to call it, then that is what you do. You find a way. But you also find a way to preserve the fertility, the longevity, excuse my English, of the ingredients that you have in your larder or in your basement. And there's, I mean, getting back to using the things from the kitchen for fertility, but also to protect someone else's or your own fertility with, harkening back to my first example of a grandmother coming at you with a wooden spoon, that commands respect and for people to back off really quickly. It's fascinating stuff, this, which this is why I like a whisk. Whisks are just they're so practical. If you chuck them at someone, they're bound to hit, but I've had practice and it, you can whip cream with it, so you can multiply food. So if you whip cream, you're making more to share on a cake or during a party. So it's the multiplying of what you already have. That's an important part in my kitchen doings, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yes, I really like that. And we talked a lot about like sweetening jars, for example, as a technique that comes out of the African American hoodoo tradition. But what a way to actually multiply blessings is to take sugar and cream and whip it into, something that is now larger. It's kind of like grains of rice or wheat, being able to go from something
Yeah.
small to multiplying, right? When the yeast rises, it literally multiplies. That's why a piece of bread, especially a Slavsky kolach that is made for a saint, is incorporated into every saint charm I ever sell. I sold some Haralambos ones recently. Last year I sold some St. George ones. Keeping just a little reminder to folks to keep your eyes peeled for some further St. George things. It's not going to be out on his day, but it will be out later. There's like these spirits get fed on the bread because it goes from nothing to something. Like it literally rises, and obviously there's a mirror to the Eucharist there. But and that way, sugar and cream and these things also becoming larger. What a great way to do money magic, or to increase love and to increase affection between a couple. I'm a firm believer in making like whipped cream to serve a couple like hot cocoa with, and then that smooths things over with blessed honey. You know what I mean? After like a pretty hard argument, and this can even be done
Where's the
together.
lie?
Yeah, this can even be done like together consensually, right? Like the couple is like, we want to make up. We're having some hard times. We're not able to communicate. Let's do something together to make it easier to understand each other, so we can return to that
Yeah.
place of compassion and care and cooperative conscientiousness that will let us move past our individual traumas and actually just listen to each other.
Yeah. No, certainly. Um, do you know what my favorite thing to do is in the kitchen?
Do tell.
I've forgotten the English word very conveniently, but it's you make a simple syrup, which is fun on its own because sugar,
Hmm.
and then you chuck in finely cut orange peels or lemon peels or
Mhm.
whatever fruit you can with a rind, and boil them, gently simmer them in the simple syrup. Um, I forgot the name of the technique, but just doing that, the freshness of the citrus fruit and the sweetness of the sugar, it's it has never failed me to bring about harmony through a cake. I work in elderly
Mm-hmm.
care,
Hmm.
and there are frequent heated discussions in the living room, as we call them,
Mhm.
where my elderly are. And to smooth that out, also because I don't want to deal with conflict. So
Mm.
that says something about me. But it's just a simple vanilla cake. And once it's out of the oven, while it's still hot, I just dunk that simple syrup with the now almost transparent rinds over it. So completely drenching it, and letting it cool somewhat, and then slicing it into nice thick pieces with some fresh whipped cream, which usually has some. I like to put some sugar, vanilla sugar in that, and then serving that out. It's not as sweet as you'd think. It's still very sweet, but not as mind-breaking sweet as you'd guess. And afterwards, everyone is sated, happy-ish,
Hmm.
and calm. And that's what citrus fruits are great for in that recipe. Although my favorite has to be sugared kumquats.
Ah.
And it's kumquats are the shot glasses of the citrus realm, I think, because you bite into one and it's always delicious. It's always a fizzy, happy mouth feeling.
Hmm.
And making candied ones, I think that's the term for it. It's just, yes, it's everything.
I
So yeah.
love that. And I love the very like kind use of it too, is it just instilling the opportunity for remediation and for everyone coming back on the same page during periods of intensity. I was having a little chat with Key the other day where we were discussing like, um, hot spirits of violence and intensity and friction and crossroads and tricksters and so on, can just heat ordinary situations sometimes by nature into misunderstandings and into potential for, every witch wants to start slinging spells and so on. But having like what better way to like chill out and return to a place of camaraderie and compassion and understanding where everyone's coming from than something sweet and airy and light.
to quote a certain French monarch, let them eat cake.
So true, bestie. So true. Key, you're a kitchen wizard if I've ever seen one. I know that we've mentioned a lot on the podcast about how you regularly make these five-star meals for many of us that are blessed to know you in real life. What are your favorite tools? 'Cause I know you do a lot of juju in your kitchen.
hmm Um, I think my favorite's got to be the cutlery, right? Good
Hmm.
old fork, spoon, and knife. Um, Specifically because for those who have been with me in kitchens, they know that I can be a bit knocking things over.
Hmm.
And I think one of the easiest ways to make use of that is like the omens and divinations and like that entire set that comes with these implements, such that if you have drop a fork, a spoon, and a knife and see how they overlap with each other, these will all tell you different things. Different people will come through your door in certain situations.
Hmm.
And then of course, I'm a kitchen knife guy, keeping storms away, especially because you go outside and cut the cloud and it just goes around your house.
Yeah. We do that too. Actually, in the Zlatibor region, there's a lot of stories of like taking a kitchen knife to like slice the clouds in half or in sections and then divide them. Or especially if there's hail, for example, like if hail
Hmm
is coming. Because again, Gradobranitelj is a name for a weather sorcerer. Little Grad is hail and Branitelj is basically protector. So it's someone who protects people from hail.
hmm
And so they come and they either heat the edges of like these of cutlery, it's metal, into something that can disperse the hail, or they'll do that with the fatwood staff that's burnt on both ends. And so whenever these individuals have disputes with people, you could just threaten them using the winds. Um, but you can also uh, give riddles to the winds and use workings with Ilya, the prorok. Wow, I can't speak English, please. Prophet Elijah, there we go, who is called upon to mediate these weathers as well. I think we can maybe talk a little bit about some recipes then before we finish up the episode.
hmm
All right. In that case, now that we've chatted a little bit about fun implements, let's hang out a little bit longer and just share our favorite recipes to offer to spirits or to use in magic. So whether it's for, shitting on your neighbor because they've been nasty, or repairing your bonds with them because you're trying to be gracious, or just feeding spirits. Caspar, maybe you can tell us yours because when you did initially share it with me, I did indeed drool.
Oh, I mean, everyone who doesn't love brownies? Come on.
Yes.
So I always like to keep things simple. So for brownies, use whatever recipe you like. I use, and don't come at me with any black-handled knives on this, but I use box brownies from a box.
Hey, it works.
Yeah, but there are some people who get really upset over cake mix that or brownie mix that's from a box because apparently it doesn't count. But they're amazing. Shut up. Not you, Svinga, but anyone who disagrees. Um, so you just have your standard brownie mix. But if you want to doctor it, sort of say, instead of water, use milk. Don't be stupid like me and use heavy cream because it will make the brownies too heavy. So you won't be able to eat your usual portion, shall we say. Just use full fat milk and you can be creative with any extra spices that you want to add, but just add them in the dry mixture. So if you're gonna grind up some what's it if you're going to use cinnamon, toast the ground cinnamon, toast it lightly in a small pan and then add it to the box mix. If you're going to use what's that uh cardamom, If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
do cardamom, don't toast it, but just ground it lightly or finely, whatever you prefer, and add it to the dry ingredients. Now we're going to get to my favorite one, which is tonka bean. Ever since I've discovered tonka beans, I've been converted to the Gospel of Tonka. And you only need a tiny amount. And if I say tiny amount, I mean minuscule. Because if you use, let's say, like half your pinky nail
Mm-hmm.
of a tonka bean and you chop that up really finely, what's going to happen is that your brownies will smell divine in the oven. And once they get out of the oven and you can't contain yourself and you have a bite of a still hot brownie, it's going to taste like a regular brownie, but with something extra, which is the tonka bean. But in the course of 3 hours, you won't be able to taste the chocolate anymore. It will completely taste like a tonka bean,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't sound bad, but it's so overpowered. It's, like your favorite perfume,
Mm-hmm.
but you've doused yourself in it instead of like a spritz here or there. It's you just need to proportion it. So if you take half of your pinky nail, you cut that off the tonka bean and you half that portion again. That small amount, that quarter, is what you want to peel off the bark, chop it really finely. If you get to the fine stage where you can like what you can do with garlic, once you've chopped it fine enough, you can crush it and smear it out with your knife.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you can either add it to the dry ingredients or to the milk that you warm slightly and whisk it for adding extra fertility in it. And then just mix the whole thing as the boxed recipe says. And then just put it in the oven and just take up a chair and a little container to put underneath your chin for all the drooling you're about to do because it smells amazing. And these brownies are, I call them my party brownies
Mm-hmm.
because I usually bring them to parties if I have the time to make them. But tonka bean is so, at least that I know it is excellent for wishing, magic around wishing. So these brownies, when I make them for myself, half of them ends up as petition brownies. So you can stick a paper in them with a little candle. They look like a chocolate cake, then a birthday chocolate cake, and just offer them up to a particular spirit for the petition, aka wish. Yeah, that's one of my favorite recipes for that.
My
Mm.
diet might be compromised now.
That sounds so good.
Yeah, that's
Listen, Salt, these brownies look at your diet and they just wink at you and be like, but you have room for one more, don't you? That's what these brownies.
Oh no. It's dangerous. That's dangerous. That like that's what you mean, right? Like when Springer says about witchcraft being dangerous, when magic we talk about magic being dangerous. This is one of the
Mm.
things that we really mean.
Literally, though. Oh, amazing.
Did
All
I
right.
tell you guys my kitchen name?
No.
The name I've given to my kitchen, and it's not a secret name, it's more of a joke.
Uh-huh.
Uh, the Elf Hill.
Mm.
Because
I
once
like
you
it.
had my brownies, you never leave.
Scary.
So I call them my wishing brownies, but they're really my put a leash on them and dominate people brownies.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, never mind.
Anything to share, Swinger?
No, no, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, that was for the recipe.
I love it. Love it. All right, boys. What are yours?
I so this one I had to think about it and I was trying to decide and in the end I wanted to go with something, introduce some humoral cooking, right? And like early modern dietetics to it. So For me, it's got to be a rosemary lamb slow cook. Um,
Mm.
and specifically, what this dish is trying to do is kind of induce, promote the sanguine humors. Now, obviously, when it comes to food, food is more of a, it's not an acute treatment. It's not going to be like this intensive act necessarily, unless you do some enchantments on top of it, which you always should be doing. But
Hmm.
the yeah, the idea behind this is kind of just promoting, good hot and moist humors, promoting the nourishing of the blood. It's great if, for example, you're dealing with eating disorders or something like that, and you want something that's going to be satiating, but you can eat like a relatively smaller quantity, um, and the appetite should be increased afterwards, thankfully. And one of the things I really wanted to like bear in mind is the role that that preparation plays when we're making a meal, especially when we think about humoral theory, right? So like roast beef is a good example. It's like a classic English meal, right? And with roast beef, we have a cold and dry meat, but the way we are preparing it, we're roasting it. This is also actively drying it. Roasting is a very drying means of preparing food. So when we're making recipes according to these principles, we want to consider that, is it going to moisten the food? Is it going to dry it? And in this case, since we're trying to break through melancholy, one of the things we can do is take take the ingredients that are suited to our purpose, which in this case is the flourishing of the humours, the sanguine humours, and cook it in a way that is also going to help promote that. So to start with, what we're going to need is a little bit of rosemary, watercress, sugar, some wine, and the rosemary, the wine, the lamb. All of this is going to be good for what we're looking for. The watercress is a little bit choleric, but it's going to be balanced out by things we add later. And the first step is really dropping all of the herbs at the bottom of the slow cooker and adding the lamb on top of it. Sprinkle the rosemary or more of it on top as well, and add in the wine. Now, that's just the start, right? Because we're going to slow cook that for 8 to 9 hours. But once that's done, we also need a sauce, right? Because we're talking about moistening, we're talking about, ensuring, but we also want it to be hot. So in this case, probably onion sauce is my go-to. Gravy is going to be too heavy. Mint sauce is going to be a bit, cooling. And the nice thing about onion sauce is that while the onions are hot, they're balanced for the inclusion of dairy. So we start by frying the onions in butter a little bit to soften them, add the flour and start mixing it up. After a minute or two, we add the milk and bring it up to a boil. We keep on stirring. At the end, you can add some double cream, maybe a little pepper as well, just to keep the coldness in check from the added cream, butter, and milk. And we end up with a nice onion sauce. And so we've got our meat, we've got our sauce. And on top of that, obviously, you have sides, right? And when I'm thinking of sides, probably beets, red cabbages, good options if we really want to include starches, which I know, everyone wants to include starches. Um, Roasted parsnips would be my personal recommendation with this.
Hmm.
So, but this is something that I find is really good for promoting, the appetite, provoking good health, nourishing the blood. It's also, something suitable for celebrating with spirits, for example, like on a feast day, right? Because this is the kind of thing you can just cook for your family as a formal like feast, essentially, part of a Sunday roast, really.
Yeah.
Um, a bit light for one, but still kind of suitable for that. And that's obviously a way to engage with spirits as well, is communal feasting and having them present at the table whilst you feed everyone else. So that was kind of the function or goal of this recipe, I guess. And it is absolutely delicious. The cut of lamb I recommend is specifically shoulder. Leg is also fine. The benefit of lamb is that A, it's just a generally warmer animal to begin with, but also it's young, right? Like lamb is generally speaking a young meat. It's not like beef where it tends to be older. Um, and that's obviously the time when the sanguine humours are more abundant in a living creature is in its youth. So it's kind of mindset I'm going with that.
I love that. Um,
Ooh,
Actually, mine is
actually drooling.
mm-hmm. Mine actually reminds me a little bit of that because it's not a meat recipe, it's a bread recipe, but it's relating to some of the things you were just talking about, salt. And you can still see how that particular roast could be given to spirits, like the whole idea of a Sunday roast, right? And like giving all of these different kinds of wonderful things to nourish a whole family plus the spirits, right? Mine is a krawaj, which comes from the word krava, which is cow. It is a wreath-shaped bread. I actually have a picture of one that I made that's available with Cunning Command on my St. George's Charms of the Victory Bearer post because I made it as part of the St. George's Day celebration. They are typically made on Georgevdan, on St. George's Day. They can also be made for Epiphany on Bogojaganie. And you can buy them in bakeries in Serbia, but on those days, but you can also make them yourself. And there's different recipes for them. Obviously, every family will have their own take, but generally, and keep in mind, this is no joke that these recipes tend not to have measurements. It's kind of like, oh, you just add the oil until it's done, until it's ready. I will give you some possible approximations, but real tradition is that you don't include any. But generally, you have warm water in a large bowl, and you put in the yeast and stir it, and so it activates it. Add the sugar and the salt, right, and you let it activate. Normally, because this is for a saint, you would do this with a little bit of holy water as well, as part of the warm water. And then you sift flour. Usually, this is around 1 kilogram of flour into a deep pan. You melt the butter. Which is generally, in this case, is going to be about half a package, so about 60 grams. And now the butter and the oil, which should be half a cup, is going to be added to a hollow that you make in the flour. You would add in kyselé mleko, which is yogurt. Essentially, it's fermented milk, or usually sheep's milk. In this case, it would be sheep's milk, because typically this is when the sheep are being milked around this time period, around St. George's Day. It's the sheeping season. Really, you might hear this called soured milk. Kefir is sometimes used instead, but sour, we call this like yogurt as well. So just look for it in your bulk and grocery stores or make it yourself. And you add this to the mixture. And now as you are activating everything, a sticky dough should be, forming. You break the eggs one by one. You're doing 3 eggs in total, and then you are adding the activated yeast. And now, as it gradually, keeps being needed, you add more flour and so on into the middle until all of the ingredients are completely incorporated. And typically, you'd use a wooden spatula to knead a dough until it forms like a sticky lump, right? And then you move to your hands. And actually, it's said that women who've made this, when their hands are still sticky from the dough, they might go out and touch trees on their property to increase their fertility. They might touch tools that are especially considered to be, needing of fertility and power and so on and so forth. So as you're going around, you're basically touching anything that could use a fertility boost because now your hands are boosted by the fertility of making this dish. Meanwhile, obviously you let it rise, right, in a warm place, and then you prepare an oiled pan or an oven-proof dish, place it in the center, where you now add your dough when it's fully risen and double in size. You make a hole, right, and you should grease it on the outside so it forms like a wreath. That's the main, it should look like a giant donut, essentially. And then you could also make one giant one or two smaller ones, depending on what, you might want to make one for your family and one for the spirits, which is what I typically do. And then you can, again, knead it continually over and over again for shaping. The middle, you can place a container to prepare so that it doesn't actually like inflate and squeeze up the donut hole. You might want to put some container in the middle so that it actually sticks to it. And of course, you should oil this as well. And then separate one yolk and beat it with a little bit of oil and a few drops of holy water to create a mixture that you can now bathe the whole thing in to create that golden exterior. And you might also want to put on some sesame seeds or some poppy seeds. Some people do both as a kind of topping. And then it goes straight in the oven for 200 Celsius. Some people start at 100 and then slowly increase it to 200. And it's in there until it's done. That's the recipe, right? Bake until it's done. Some people like, it's typical that you start at 100 degrees and you gradually increase it to 200. And this is also done to mirror the kind of fertility powers of this. I've talked a lot about Thursday salt. A great thing, good old rye flour and a coarse rock salt added together and left in the oven on Maundy Thursday until it's black and consistent. And some people include a bit of Thursday salt in this as well, if they're using it strictly for sorcery. Otherwise, this is just a great recipe to actually give your spirits a little treat, as it were, that increases their fertility and their power and their potency. Literally, like for things that you want to pour down the hole, the donut hole of the kravai, are blessed automatically because it also refers to the wreaths of woven flowers and plants that are placed around sheep or cow milking pails that the sheep are milked into on that day, on St. George's Day. And then this protects the fertility of the farm animals, and it also protects the security of the dairy products. And then you would place either that wreath later on to be buried over anthills, with the anthills will lock up the fertility and secure it, or you might place it over the door to keep you, or the threshold, or the fence surrounding the village to protect the whole community. So that's my recipe, kravai. So it's a Kravaj.
Amazing.
And last but not least, Key, what's yours?
Yeah, for me, also throwing in a bread into the mix. This time a little more to my chemical sensibilities. This being a Irish soda bread. Always had a bunch of these growing up. Like, so my grandma would just crank them out whenever we'd show up. But yeah, one of the, pretty straightforward flour, some sugar, salt, and really the key to doing this right are to use buttermilk, as well as some citrus. So this nice sort of summer soda bread, it's really good with tea, is to do a lemon lavender one.
Ooh, that sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
Carmen.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. So really you just to go back to the whisk and increasing the blessing, right? You whisk together the flour, sugar, lemon zest, some of the lavender buds, salt, and baking soda, and then you will take butter that is very cold, right? And you will cut the butter into the flour. This is very important. Following that, you can, add some more lemon juice, some vanilla, and stir in your buttermilk. Then make it into a ball. Cut across in the top. This is very important. A, for it to cook right, and B, I heard somewhere that this lets the fairies out of the ingredients so that you don't bake them,
Based?
which I think is awesome. And then, sprinkle it with some sugar and bake it for about 30, 40 minutes. Let it cool. Very important that you let it cool before you eat it. And yeah, you go from there.
Hell yeah. Love it. Guys,
Ooh.
thank you so much. This was really fun. I hope people thought it was just cute and they got some cool recipes and some tips and tricks for magic out of it. Go fill your pantries with all the best herbs and spices and make your house smell absolutely beautiful. Get those simple syrups, as Caspar was saying, going. I know whenever Key you make simple syrups at my place, it smells amazing for like a week afterwards. And certainly I've taken after you, and Salt, you've taught me all about the magic of amazing roasts that now I regularly make for my spirits. And Caspar, I will be making those tonka bean brownies and letting you know how it goes.
Well, looking forward to that.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. I don't know if you guys have your Akashic records ready. Mine is Glorilla's Let Her Cook. It's it's just a good one to have, okay? It's thematically appropriate,
Love it.
always relevant, great for juju, great for any kind of juju you're doing. It doesn't even matter what the purpose of it is, whether you're cursing or blessing. Let her cook.
Hey, we listen and we don't judge that much.
Yeah, not at least I'm not out loud. You guys can judge when I log off.
Um, I my Akashic record is from Shireen, Kalam Aina. I've sent you the link, Smika.
Mm.
But it's my new kitchen jam.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, what a gorgeous song too. Thank you so much.
I know.
All right, Key.
Mhm.
What's yours? Is it Spin Spin Sugar or is it something else?
I wish. No, I went with something far goofier, which is Aya von Satan by Tool, the cookie recipe, famously.
Ah! Oh my God.
So just to throw another recipe into the mix, you know.
Oh my God, that's such a good one. Holy crap.
I need to listen to that one.
That's so funny.
Oh, it's so funny.
Well, the license to depart for this episode is none other than a St. Lawrence prayer because I need to go watch that movie, Caspar. And also
Mhm.
because sometimes you just gotta tell them, if your haters are whispering behind you, fart on them. Well, in that case, if they're cooking you, just tell them to turn you over. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, yeah. Just own it.
Just own it.
Just
That's
like
right.
you're
Keep
not
that 10
cooking.
even.
Yeah, you're not cooking me. I'm cooking myself, and you're just watching.
Precisely.
Mhm.
All right, give it to us, Keep.
O generous patron of the church's poor, Saint Lawrence, pray to the one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that all the poor of the church in need in every corner of the world may feel the effect of the love of their brothers and sisters who seek to help them. Deliver the church from the greed and envy of the powerful and protect her rights and property so that she may serve the needy in freedom, giving them good things for soul and body. May we come someday with all those whom we helped on earth to the bright mansions of heaven, where we will enjoy the riches of God's house and the company of the Savior who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Hamburger, cheeseburger, Big Mac, Whopper.
Hamburger, cheeseburger, Big Mac, Whopper.